And welcome to the Wednesday edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. My name is Dan Ahlstrand. I'm filling in for Todd today, who will be back tomorrow. Very glad you can spend some time with us today. There's certainly a lot to talk about. How about the weather, right? Environment Canada has issued a frost advisory. If you were out driving around or walking around during the long weekend, the May long weekend, it was like a gardener's paradise in HRM. I drove around a bit. I walked around my neighborhood. People were putting their flower beds in and getting the garden tilled up and some of the stuff planted. Well, if you did some of that hard work, and let's be honest, expensive work, during the long weekend, you might want to take some extra precautions tonight. Environment Canada says that we're going to get dangerously close to that freezing mark. There's a frost advisory in effect. I think it's for the entirety of the province of Nova Scotia. So get out there and cover up the tomatoes and cover up the petunias and those kind of things so you don't lose them. It looks like this might be the sort of the last vestige of these frosty days as we work our way through May. But it's not even just here. It's right across the country. We went from those wild temperatures a week ago where it was 27 degrees. People are walking around in shorts and getting sunburns, and now we're back to what should be April weather in May, the end of May. But anyway, just wanted to pass it along to you if you have some gardens or things that are planted that you might want to throw some plastic over them or an old bedsheet over them tonight so that they don't freeze, as we are expecting, particularly in the low-lying areas, some frost. Well, this time a couple of days from now, we could be staring down the barrel of another strike at Canada Post, the second time in 6 months. The Crown Corporation says it's broke, it's losing money, needs to change in order to compete, and that includes weekend work. Now, the union doesn't seem to agree with that. The whole thing leads me to think that it may be time to have a serious conversation about Canada Post and perhaps privatize that Crown Corporation. Crown corporations need to be run like businesses. Let's face it, it's 2025. We can't just have the Canada Post being the Canada Post because it's always been the Canada Post, right? I'm of the opinion that Canada Post will never be a profitable entity in its current form, and not even break even if it's running like it is. Crown corporations, again, my opinion, should never compete against private interest. It's unfair. It's not a level playing field. And Canada Post, let's be frank, is competing against a lot of private interest with the delivery companies and the couriers and those kind of things that are all competing for that parcel dollar that we've all become accustomed to with our online ordering and shopping. I suppose the solution is that we don't shop online and we shop local, which I certainly would advocate for, but many people don't, and many people use that service, and some will suggest that the couriers have never been busier than they are now with a bunch of different services that they offer. And Canada Post is trying to compete in that environment. Letter mail doesn't carry the mail anymore. It just doesn't. When's the last time you got a letter from somebody? Like a letter, like a in the mail, stamp on it letter. The only thing that I get in my mailbox other than flyers and political ads are bills. And most of those bills we can do now online. Time to jettison the post office, my opinion. Might be something you want to talk about in the open hour. Don't forget, today is Wednesday. So we'll shift the open hour from 11 o'clock until noon for the Mid-Week Meltdown in order to make room for Dr. John Gillis. He'll be here just after 11 o'clock today. I hope that you have some medical-related questions that you would like to have answered by the good doctor. That's going to happen in about an hour's time. But before that, I saw a release on my desk over the last day or so from the Nova Scotia NDP, and they're now calling on the Houston government to create an enforcement unit to end the abuse of fixed-term leases and implement real rent control as renters continue to push for fairness within the residential tenancy system. Very pleased to welcome back to the program leader of the Nova Scotia NDP, and that's Claudia Chender. Claudia, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Dan?
I am wonderful. Glad to be back in the big chair, at least for one day.
Yeah, nice to hear you.
I guess we start there. Is this another case, this rent control plan put out by the Houston government, and a lot of bluster, a headline, and then really no follow-up or even the ability to properly police it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the rent cap is totally not working. So we have this 5% rent cap, which, by the way, is the highest in the country, but almost nobody is subject to it because landlords know that there's a loophole where if you only rent to someone for a fixed period of time, usually a year, it doesn't apply. And so what's happening is that rents are rising much faster than that 5%. And so what that means for people is they get priced out of their community. They certainly get priced out of their home on a very regular basis. And increasingly, they get priced out of the province, which, I'm sure you'll be talking about labor shortages and all kinds of other things. This is something we can't afford. We want young people to live here, and a third of the people in our province and much higher than that in our city are renters.
Over the last week, Claudia, I've heard some people talking on this show and in other places that the PC government seems to be, I hate to use the word afraid, but maybe wary of backlash from landlords because of what we heard from the minister last week with regards to the not to crack down on the fixed term leases, and the associate deputy minister saying the same thing, that they don't want to upset the housing market. What's your thought on that?
I don't think it makes any sense, if I'm being honest, Dan. We've got lots of cranes in the sky. We've got lots of building happening. Not much of it is actually affordable. And what we actually need is protection for renters that makes sense. They can build all the houses they want, but if people can't afford them, and if people are leaving our province, they're going to sit empty. So that's not going to be good for the housing market either. We need people to be able to have stable housing and work good jobs and live a good life in Nova Scotia. And right now, that piece, this housing piece, is glaringly absent from the government's plans to make sure that people can do that. And, everything's expensive. Things are expensive for property owners and landlords too, but things like enforcement, which all areas of the housing spectrum have argued for. The government itself commissioned a report that said we should do it. Things like a functional residential tenancy system where landlords could apply for rental increases and get those if they need them. But that tenants also knew that they were protected and could stay in their home for more than a year without an exponential rent increase at the end of that. That's what we need. And for some reason, this government absolutely refuses to take any action.
Wouldn't that create a whole bunch more red tape, though, if we had to have everybody go to appear before a tribunal or a government agency or whatever to apply for an increase in rent? Wouldn't that just create all kinds of government red tape?
No, it's just for an extraordinary increase. And this existed in Nova Scotia up until the 80s. It worked fine. It exists in lots of other provinces. So the idea is that you have a scheduled increase. So that could be 5%. That could be, whatever makes sense, tied to the cost of living, something reasonable. And that, both tenants and landlords should be able to accommodate those scheduled increases. But what we hear a lot as a kind of defense for extraordinary rent increases, well, we needed to replace the heating system or we needed to replace the windows and things are expensive. Okay, right now, the only way landlords can recover that cost is to switch to fixed term leases and jack those rents. But we could have a system where people could have what's called security of tenure. They could know that they can stay in their home for more than a year, but landlords could also recover those costs if they need to. Not every time, not all the time. And, the enforcement unit, the government commissioned their own study. It would be $1 million and a few more people a year in, the scheme of government budgeting. That's not a whole lot of money to make things work better and be a lot fairer.
And that was my next question. What do you think that enforcement unit should look like, and what kind of and how would it get its power, Claudia? Like, would it be a criminal offense, or would it be a bylaw, or how would that work?
We have the government themselves commissioned a report from Davis Peer a couple of years ago that laid all of this out. They would have the power of enforcement. It's civil, of course, not criminal, but they would be able, right now, the government talks a lot about balance. So they say we need a balance between tenants and landlords. And I'll tell you, the people we talk to have to take time off work, figure out how the residential tenancy system works, spend money to, make applications, take people to an appeal. And even if they win, nothing happens. It's almost impossible to enforce, and there's no penalty. So we don't have balance right now. We just have a system where if you can't afford to get into the housing market, which, by the way, in the last 5 years has become almost impossible for anyone who doesn't have extra help or a really good income, then, you have a terrible situation in housing. You're really at the mercy of very unregulated system, which in a time when costs are going up the way they are, I think is going to be really challenging economically for us as we seek to fill all the jobs we have, to retain our young folks, and to do all the things that generally I think we all agree that we want to do.
Should we have rent control? Bottom line, should we have rent control in Nova Scotia?
Yes, we've had it before. It exists in lots of other places across the country, and it makes sense. It's fairness. It doesn't have to be something that is, as you say, a lot of red tape, nothing like that. It's just a shift in the system so that this government rent cap that is basically window dressing and doesn't work, works. That we have, some kind of system, and that rent cap can change year to year. It can be tied to an external metric like, the consumer price index. Again, we talked about extraordinary expenses can be accommodated, but we would have actual fairness in our rental system, and we don't have that now. And we don't have predictability now, which isn't good for anyone.
Claudia, I've seen the Premier was out yesterday. I've seen ministers making announcements over the last couple of weeks. Any idea when we're going back to work at the Ledge?
Oh, well, we are the only province that has very little ability to forecast that because successive governments have refused to implement a legislative calendar. But our rules say spring and fall. So we've had spring. So we're looking to the fall.
Wow.
It's over.
Yeah.
So you can use your own definition of fall, but generally that would be sometime between September and November.
So we could go the entire summer without having any action on the floor of the legislature.
Well, we will, unless the Premier calls us back for an emergency. The last emergency was to stop MLA pay raises. But, he just gave all of his members a nice, generous top-up as ministerial assistants. So I guess that's not an emergency anymore.
Good work if you can get it, if you only have to work for 10 days every quarter, right, or every half a year.
Well, we're working all year, Dan. And
I'm being facetious, I know.
I know, but I will say the summer is a really busy time because that allows us to be in our constituencies and helping folks out and meeting with people and making sure that we're doing the best we can for our community right across the province. For me, that's, being in every community as much as I can. But yeah, no, we don't expect to be back till September, October.
You going to build up that forearm strength flipping hamburgers over the summer?
Sure. Yeah.
All right, Claudia.
Absolutely. I've got to find some time to exercise, don't I?
Fair enough. Absolutely. Just don't eat them. Just flip them, right?
That's right.
Claudia, as always, I know you're busy. I appreciate your time.
Okay, thanks.
That is the NDP leader in Nova Scotia, Claudia Chender, who is raising some more alarm bells. I guess it shouldn't. It's because it happens so often that we get a government report, right? How many of them have we seen? Where we get a government report and then they make all these recommendations and the government says, yeah, okay, it's a great idea. And then, we shelve it. If this, apparently, according to the numbers provided by the NDP, that the report into this enforcement unit was $300,000. That was the cost of it. And we are any closer to having any kind of resolution with that. And I know Todd talked about this a lot last week with the minister saying that they don't want to clamp down on something they know is being abused. They know that this fixed term lease thing is being abused. But they don't want to clamp down on it because of, and I'm putting quotations around this, an unintended consequence of upsetting the housing market. Strange times. We're going to stop and take our very first break here on the Wednesday edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. But when we come back, some concern from the Canadian Association of Retired Persons that the Minister for Seniors post has been downgraded to a junior spot in the Mark Carney cabinet. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I am Dan Alstrand. Hope you're having a fantastic day. It's been a bit of time now, a couple of weeks, if even that, since the wraps were taken off of the Mark Carney new cabinet as they are getting down to work and getting into their portfolios. And sort of the fallout with some of those decisions continues to make headlines. Nova Scotia chapter of the Canadian Association of Retired Persons sent out a release saying they congratulate Stephanie McLean on her appointment as the new federal Secretary of State for seniors, recognizing her as an excellent choice to advocate for seniors' needs. However, CARP is deeply concerned that the responsibility for 20% of Canada's population has been assigned into a junior ministerial role that reports to the Minister of Jobs and Families. And we're very pleased to welcome into the show today to put a little context on this for us from CARP here in Nova Scotia, Bill VanGorder. Bill, how are you?
I'm good, Dan. How are you?
I am well, sir. I guess let's start there. Not happy with the Minister of Seniors being kind of downgraded?
Very disappointed. We've had a Minister of Seniors finally for the last little over 10 years, and so this is really a downgrading of the government's interest and concern for seniors. And I think there are some other sectors of the population who would also feel the same way about their sector, but it's hard to understand how a demographic that takes up 20%, as you said, of the population would be downgraded in this way. And secretaries of state are not ministers, far from it. And no matter how good a member Stephanie McLean may be, and I'm sure she'll be as effective as she's able to, a secretary of state doesn't have the same clout.
Bill, I was in preparation for our interview today. I was on the CARP website, the National CARP website, reading sort of their take on the whole things. And there's a line here that kind of jumped off the page to me, and I'm interested in your thoughts on it. It says, the demotion from the cabinet table is a shabby reward for overwhelming elder loyalty in the recent election, and it's an inauspicious start for a new government in dealing with the seniors file. Do you agree with that statement?
I think I agree with the intent of it. As you know, it's not my style to use quite those same words, and I'm not writing the national position papers any longer, as I have been for the last five and a half years. So that's strongly put, but I think what it shows is the real concern that we're getting from our members. This isn't just the National Office of CARP speaking. This is what our members are telling us. They're emailing us. They're calling us and saying, what's happening? This government promised to be concerned about all sectors, including seniors. Why would they make this kind of choice? And frankly, it would have been better, we think, to have a combined ministry, as we had a couple of times in past, where the labor minister was also the seniors minister. That kind of thing happened a couple of times. That would be much superior than to having some junior a person who's not sitting at the cabinet table representing seniors.
What issues do you see, Bill, slipping under the carpet with no dedicated seniors minister?
Well, there are three or four that are really concerning to us. The first is around the whole area of financial security. Seniors are really being hit hard by the cost of living, and I know it irritates them these days to have the numbers come out to say, "Oh, the cost of living is down. Isn't this wonderful?" And seniors are saying, "Yeah, it's down because they took the carbon tax off, but food prices are still going up. Housing prices are still going up." And this is creating a ripple effect right down the economy, because if seniors can't afford the housing that they would like to get into, then they're going to stay in their larger, older homes, and that means those larger, older homes aren't going to be available for younger people. If the cost of living continues to go up and food goes up, it means that seniors are going to have to make the choices between eating well and medication and other things that they might have. Another area is the whole area of retirement age. Using the age 65 or 67 for anything around retirement is foolish these days. 65 is a fictitious number that was set by Bismarck decades ago to get rid of some generals, and somehow it's stuck with no scientific background to say that 65 is when people should actually stop working. In fact, they shouldn't. We know people are living longer, health care is better. Why do we create that kind of situation? And the best example, of course, is having to cash in your savings, your RIF savings at the age of 71. People should be able to make a choice about that. There are some people who should be cashing in before they're 71, and some who will want to wait till they're well into their 80s before they cash in, depending on their overall financial situation. So to say that they have to do it at the age of 71 is ridiculous, unfair, and doesn't allow seniors the choice that they want. So those are the big areas around finance, and the other is health. We have a so-called pharmacare plan, but it really isn't that. It covers some contraceptive drugs, which aren't important to most seniors, and some diabetes drugs that even the Diabetes Association saying aren't the ones most important to be covered, so that it's not something that is working for seniors yet. It needs to be pushed, and the dental plan may or may not be working. We're still getting a lot of feedback from people who don't think there's adequate coverage in the areas that seniors need to have dental care. So that the health is the other big area for seniors these days.
Well, Bill, cost of living and food prices and housing prices and even the pharmacare program, contraceptives aside, that impacts just about everybody, doesn't it? Do we need to have a specific minister that is dedicated to just focusing on those areas with regards to seniors?
Well, what other minister would just focus on those in terms of the needs of the people? That's the problem. The health ministry is huge and has pressure from all sides on all areas. So would you break it down and have some experts in for each of the demographic areas for those?
Just work as a collective, right? And make it work for all.
There may be a creative way of doing it, but that's not what's happening. What they've done is hive this off to a junior minister without impact to make the impression that there's representation. And as I said earlier, I'm sure there are other demographics who think that they need to have more understanding. In this cabinet, people seem to be forgotten. We have an minister of AI instead of a minister of seniors. Is that a good idea? I have no idea because I don't know what that person will do, but it seems like a very odd decision.
Bill, I was looking forward to turning 65 and being able to retire. You put a dark cloud on my day.
Well, I'm 82 and I haven't retired from working yet, so you've got a long way to go yet before you can do it too.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate your time.
Anytime.
That is Bill VanGorder from CARP here in Nova Scotia. Disappointed that there was no minister dedicated solely to seniors. We're going to stop. We're going to take our next break. Blake's going to update us on what's going on in the news. And when we come back on the other side of it, living the high life in Halifax. No, not that high life. Living in these tall buildings. And apparently not everybody's a fan about it. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. We are back in minutes. Thanks, Blake, and welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Don't forget, coming up after the news at the top of the hour, Dr. John Gillis will be here for house calls. So if you have a medical-related question, something that you'd like to get an opinion, a second opinion on, perfect opportunity to do that. We'll open up the telephone lines right after the news at 11 o'clock. But before we do that, during the break and while I was listening to Blake read the news, I was looking out the window here in Todd's chair in the Rick House studio, and I'm looking out the window over what is the Angus L. MacDonald Bridge, and I see a crane there, and the horizon off in the distance in Dartmouth, I see a crane there. looking through the window that is immediately to Vanessa Vandenez, who I didn't thank at the beginning of the show. And you all know how important she is to this, and I'm going to do that now so that she knows how very vital she is. I'm looking out the window at the back behind her. I see a crane with a cement tube in it. I'm looking out the window that comes from the door and into the newsroom. There's another crane. So that's not anything new here in Halifax. We've seen cranes for many years now. And some are asking questions about why we're seeing so many of these buildings built, and they're putting units onto the market, but units that we just can't afford to live in. The average price, according to this story on the Global News website, and I think they're citing rentals.ca as their source. The average rent in Halifax now is $2,200 a month, and that's up 5% year over year. The headline was the one that kind of caught my attention and certainly raised interest with the people around here was, I just don't like it living the high life in Halifax and why not everyone is a fan. We're very pleased to welcome to the show to give us a little bit of perspective on this planning expert and professor emeritus at Dalhousie University, Jill Grants. Jill, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Do you like it?
Do I like the current situation with all the towers going up?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's the development of more housing is good news, but the problem is that most of the units that are going up are not affordable, and they're also not meeting the needs of families. So they're meeting certain needs, but not others.
Jill, we've been talking about housing here for more than 5 years now, and the lack thereof in HRM and pretty much right across the country, and that sort of has been the reason why we've heard all of these developments that are going up and getting approved and towers being raised up from where we used to be small businesses or homes. That being said, you say that with all of this construction going on, there's a glut on the market now.
Well, there is. I mean, you can see that there's a lot of units have gone up in the last few years, and there's a great number under construction now. And population is not growing nearly as quickly as it was immediately after the pandemic. And then the cost of the units coming on the market are such that even though there's many people who need housing, they can't afford the units that are becoming available. So there is a greater vacancy rate than we had seen in the last few years. It's still low compared to what you probably need to really bring the rents down, but there's more units, and they're taking longer to rent and to sell than in the past.
I had a conversation, maybe it was a couple of years before the pandemic, and we started to see some of the early workings of these buildings going up, and I was asking the question, how are we going to fill these apartments? And I talked to a number of landlords and developers, and they all kind of told me the same thing, and I'm interested in your thoughts on it, Jill, is that their contention is that if you build these higher-end apartments that we're seeing going up, and I'm looking at half a dozen of them out my window right now, that the people that can afford them will move into those apartments, and then that will free up the older and maybe cheaper apartments, and will be able to fulfill that need. That's just not happening, is it?
No, it's not. That's a theory that's called filtering, the idea that, if you build at the high end of the market, units will filter down to those who can't afford them. And it's an interesting theory, but it has never proven to be practical. It doesn't happen, in fact, and especially in the current context where rental housing has become what's called in the trade financialized. That is, it's used as an investment strategy, both by small-term investors who might buy a condominium unit or a small apartment building, and by large investors such as real estate investment trusts and pension plans and others who buy up units to ensure a steady stream of investment income. And so, that's what's happened to the market. It's not your grandfather's market where small apartment buildings were owned by a small company, and they often lived in one of the apartments in the unit, and they rented them out, and it was very hands-on, small-scale kind of community, but it's not that anymore. It's big business, and consequently, we've got problems such as the leases that expire after 1 year. So every year, people are having to renegotiate rents and or find other more affordable units. It's become very much an owner's market, and it's pricing out a lot of the people who need decent housing.
Jill, what's the solution here? I know we've been talking about housing for a long time now, but we seem to be leaning on developers who really exist to make money, right? That's why they're in business. Should we be doing that, or should housing become more of maybe of a government issue or a different agency's issue?
Well, if we look to the countries where people have decent housing for a decent price, the government's involved in some way or another in providing a fair amount of the stock, whether it's rental stock, as in many parts of Europe, or in some place like Singapore, where the government is a developer building housing that people can buy for affordable costs. So, I think if government doesn't get involved, then people don't have access to decent housing. So either we see housing as a right, in which case the government has a responsibility to ensure that it's provided in adequate amounts and cost, or we treat it as it is right now, which is it's a consumable, and we're not meeting people's needs, and then we end up with a lot of people living rough or double bunking because they're trying to find somewhere that they can sleep and leave their goods and other things.
Jill, affordability aside, rents aside, your background is you're a planner. And we've been talking about densification for some time as well. Is densification the right way to go for a municipality like HRM? Do we need to go up, or are we really shooting ourselves in the foot here?
Well, I mean, densification has some benefits. It means you have more people, and they can take advantage of local amenities such as parks and restaurants and other things. So there's some advantage in that. There's also problems, though, because the denser we build, in many ways, we're more likely to get smaller household sizes. So if you look at a lot of the apartments that are being built, they're pretty small. So it means one person or maybe two people sharing a unit. So the more units you build, the kind of lower number of people you tend to have in your households. And also, the more units you build, the more bathrooms you need and kitchens you need and microwaves you need. So there's a consumption of goods that goes into these denser units. I think Killam recently said that they are looking at $600,000 to build a unit in a high-rise building. Well, if you're putting that kind of money in, there's no way it's going to end up being more affordable. So some of the benefits that we've been promised for densification, like more affordability and more people in a small area, don't necessarily result. So we have to be very careful about what we think density can and can't do, and whether we want Halifax to be, as one of the new developments here in Dartmouth is calling itself Little Brooklyn, is that the kind of future that the city wants, or could we have perhaps density on a lower rise? Then we don't necessarily maybe need 40-story buildings everywhere to achieve the level of density that might make sense for Halifax. So,
have we changed the way that we live? And the reason I asked that, Jill, is when I was putting that piece together years ago, I spoke with somebody who said that there were more people living on the Halifax Peninsula in the late 50s and early 60s than are today, because there was 4 or 5 kids in a home. Is that leading to this problem as well, that we've changed the way that we live, that we have to have more space, each kid's got to have their own bedroom, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's part of it. We have a situation in which people are deciding not to marry, or marrying later, having fewer children. I think the average household size in Halifax is under 2.3, which which means we don't have a lot of people per household. And as the cost of housing and the cost of food and all these other things go up, that affects the choices that people make about whether to start a family or not. It's really expensive to start a family today and have adequate housing and have the resources to be able to meet their needs in the way that people would like to be able to do so. So I think that it's going to be some time before we see big changes in that situation of household size. So we're looking at small households, and the decisions that we're making about housing being small is furthering that trend of people choosing to either delay childbearing or not have children at all.
Jill, we're out of time. I appreciate yours.
Okay, thank you very much.
That is Jill Grant, planning expert and professor emeritus at Dalhousie University. Going to stop and take another break. When we come back, some concern among disability advocates about that new Nova Scotia Student Code of Conduct. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. We're back in minutes. All right, welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ahlstrand, in for Todd, who has the day off. He'll be back tomorrow. There was a lot of discussion before it came out. There was some consultation, from what I understand. And then there was the big announcement a couple of weeks ago that the Nova Scotia government has released a new student code of conduct to sort of guide them into different areas when it comes to schools and to the way that issues are handled. But as you might imagine, there have been some concerns raised about the Student Code of Conduct, and one of the organizations that is raising some alarms about it is Inclusion Nova Scotia. We're very pleased to welcome the board president with Inclusion Nova Scotia, and more importantly, I guess in this case, its parent, Stephanie Carver. Stephanie, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks very much. How are you doing?
I am well. I guess the very first question is the broad question. Why are we concerned about these new rules and how it fits in with inclusion?
Yeah, so Inclusion Nova Scotia definitely welcomes and acknowledges the necessity of the Code of Conduct. It's been a long time since the behavior concerns have been addressed in schools, and we understand that there have been reports in the past about violence in schools, and we don't argue with that at all. There are concerns, and certainly students with disabilities are often on the receiving end of inappropriate behaviors. Our concern is that the Code of Conduct, in many ways, we believe, will unintentionally negatively impact students with intellectual and developmental disabilities, in that students with intellectual and developmental disabilities often, their behavior is often their only form of communication. If they are overstimulated or feeling, big feelings and having a difficult day, that externally it may be viewed as inappropriate behaviors, and that the punitive measures described in the Code of Conduct will very likely negatively impact them.
Which can lead to bigger problems, right? Because if a child acts out and is sent home or suspended from school because of it, and it not necessarily their fault, then that just exacerbates the problem.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think it's really important to note that Nova Scotia education falls under the inclusive education policy. There is an inclusive education policy, which really should be the overarching guide to how students are supported in public schools from primary all the way to grade 12. And we really strongly feel that if the inclusive education policy is adequately resourced in its implementation, the number of challenging behaviors in students with disabilities will decrease. Studies show that across the country and certainly internationally, that a solid, well-resourced inclusive education policy will decrease the numbers of what we would call challenging behaviors. And as you mentioned, absolutely, students who are repeatedly students with intellectual and developmental disabilities who are repeatedly removed from classes, removed from schools, it makes it even harder for them to return and to feel safe and supported. It's really important, as we can imagine, if you're a parent, that proactive approaches are the best route to supporting student success in all areas, academic and behavior. And certainly for students who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, we know that if a trigger or a difficult situation is predictable, then the student's response to that is definitely preventable. I would also like to point out that if you kind of think it through as a parent, if you have a child who you get the phone call, the dreaded phone call on the day your child needs to come be picked up because they're having a rough time today, who is it who's on the receiving end of that phone call? Parents of children with disabilities are already disproportionately impacted. They're already feeling isolated, alienated, stigmatized, often made to feel shame about their child with disability, and very much, as you can imagine, if you kind of take that thought further, the impact really is on women, for the most part, on moms who leave their jobs and have to go pick up their child. And those families of children with disabilities are already negatively impacted financially and already lack the adequate supports. So the trickle-down effects on the students with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families is profound. And we know that the best place for all children is in the classroom with their peers, learning, and learning involves making mistakes. Learning behaviors involves making mistakes. Learning math and reading and writing involves making mistakes. And the best place to try again and is in the school.
You mentioned that it needs to be properly resourced. Does that mean more people in the classroom?
Yeah, so we've supported educators for years now who have been, calling desperately. If we think back to 2017, when teachers were in the legislature, crying for better supports in the classroom. They've been telling us for years that the system is broken. Teachers want to do their best job possible. They want to implement the inclusive education policy, but they need the supports in the classroom. And that could look different in different schools depending on what the needs are. And it could be more bodies. It could be smaller class sizes. It could be more bodies more adult bodies in the classroom. It definitely could be better, more training for all the people who are working with students. And we've seen across, nationally, internationally, that well-resourced systems are successful. And what we feel is that the inclusive education policy is a piece of paper that's been, really put on teachers to implement, regardless of the limited resources that are available to them. And we really feel that the code of conduct is really going to fall squarely on the shoulders of students who are learning.
What does the classroom look like right now? Because I hear there are not near enough support people in the classroom today.
Yeah, so I think that we've been hearing from educators that the system is maxed out. Many schools are literally bursting at the seams. Students who have intellectual and developmental disabilities and who require the supports of adults in the form of educational program assistants. Educational program assistants, they are professionals. They work in tandem with educators, and we really support EPAs. Being paid well, being trained well, and being acknowledged for the paraprofessionals that they are. So classrooms are busy. And I would say that cannot be used as an excuse or a reason to remove students with intellectual and developmental disabilities from the classroom. That in resourcing classrooms, those students have every right to be in the classroom with their peers, learning alongside with their peers, and their teachers and support staff in the school need to be adequately supported as well.
Stephanie, we're out of time. I appreciate yours.
Thank you so much. Pleasure chatting with you.
That is Stephanie Carver, board president with Inclusion Nova Scotia, and of course, more importantly, a parent. We're going to stop, take a break. Blake is going to update us on what's going on in the world. And on the other side of that, we are going to open up the telephone lines. It's time for house calls. Dr. John Gillis will be here to answer your medical-related questions. Get in early. That way you won't be disappointed. The lines are now open. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Or give us a call on the toll-free 1-877-801-8255. House calls with Dr. John after the news. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. It is time for house calls. Dr. John Gillis is here. He's just getting seated, and we're going to open up the telephone lines, 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000, or toll-free, 1-877-801-8255. I'm hearing some anecdotal information here, and maybe somebody out there can share it with me, that there has been some sort of service disruption with Bell Canada's services in Canada. I don't have any Bell stuff. So I don't know, but if that is the case, maybe just give Vanessa a call if you're having trouble with your Bell stuff today, and we can pass that along to your newsroom. Also, before we get into our segment with Dr. John, I think, Vanessa, this is a new record for me. I think that less than an hour in, and I've already offended somebody. Goes with the territory, right? When you sit in this chair, you're not going to make everybody happy. But I thought I would share this because people say I don't read their emails. Well, I do. And this one comes to me from Sarah Jefferson, who I thank very much for sending this email this morning. And she said, do you know how to use proper structure in your conversation? She said, your second sentence is incomplete. She's referring to when I say, thanks for your time, I appreciate yours. She says, what exactly do you appreciate? You didn't finish your sentence. Otherwise, why didn't you just say, thanks for yours, I appreciate yours? Always love the feedback and critiques here when I sit in the Todd Veinotte chair. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Let's welcome into the program Dr. John Gillis. Dr. John, how are you?
Doing well, thanks.
I missed up my English this morning already.
What are you up by? You doing good?
I'm okay. I know Todd traditionally starts this with a chat about the Maple Leafs, and we'll keep up with that tradition. I know you were likely as disappointed as I and the rest of Leafs Nation with Game 7 on Sunday night.
Well, I was there. It was even worse.
Oh, my gosh.
Absolutely horrible.
So the never-ending cycle of Maple Leaf disappointment continues. Does this team ever get over that hump? Do we ever get that 1967 behind us, John?
I don't know, man. It's there's so many things at play that are just absolutely depressing. They just don't seem to be able to show up in the big moments. You know, a lot of people have said it. Teams win, teams lose, but when you don't show up in the biggest moments, and the funniest thing I saw this week was someone who came to the Toronto Maple Leafs Wikipedia page to, home city, Toronto, Ontario, owner Brad Marchand. And,
little shout out to Brad, the local boy. Anyway, it is what it is. I always say that, they took the Stanley Cup champion to 7 games, and I know everybody's thinking, there's the excuses, there we go again. But they did, right? They made the second round, and I guess that's all that they were going to do this year. It would be shocking to me if that team looks the same at the start of the season that they did on Sunday.
You got to show up in the big moments, and if you don't make it at the end of the day, so be it. But they just did not show up in the big moment, and that's pretty frustrating. But anyway, it's a first world problem to be able to go see hockey games and to appreciate your team, and they're just human beings after all. And
it's a kids game, right? We get bent out of shape over a kids game, really.
Absolutely.
902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. This is House Calls. He is Dr. John Gillis. If you have a medical-related question, here is your opportunity to get a little bit of free advice on a Wednesday. We'll begin right on the phone lines, and we welcome Sheila to the program. Sheila, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you. I'm happy to be chosen to ask my question.
Sure. Your question for Dr. John, please.
I was gardening about 8 days ago, and I think I've got a swollen gland. I got a bite behind my ear, and my whole lymphatic gland is all swollen. I can't move my neck, and I was wondering how long is this going to last, and is there anything I can do?
So what did you say happened 8 days ago? I think I missed the first bit.
I got a bite, I think by a black fly, and I've never had a reaction to a black fly bite like this, but I don't think I've ever been bitten behind my ear, just sort of at the base of my skull. And I'm all swollen, I'm red there, and I'm having trouble. It's kind of going down my neck, actually, and affecting my ear. So I was wondering, like 8 days seems like a long time to be dealing with this. How long will it last, and is there anything I can do?
Well, there's a couple things. I mean, have you done anything to date? Have you taken antihistamines or anything? I mean, two things happen with bites, mainly. They either are local reactions, which respond to antihistamines, or they're infected, or sometimes both. Have you tried Reactin or anything like that?
I haven't tried. I typically react pretty poorly to those things. So all I've done is just ice it, but it's actually knocking me out. I feel very weak and even kind of dizzy by it.
By 8 days, you should probably get someone to take a look at that, and you may have an infection. And again, not to be picky about words, but when you say you can't move your neck, do you mean it hurts or it's uncomfortable, or you physically?
Well, I can move my neck, but yeah, it just feels like I have. It's very stiff. It's very stiff. I mean, I did do, Dr. Google. I don't think I've meningitis or anything because I can put my chin down to my chest, but I just am having trouble moving my head to my left side where the bite is.
Yeah, so I mean, I would try some antihistamines if you can tolerate them. I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by you don't do well with them. Some anti-inflammatories like Aleve or ibuprofen might help. But 8 days in, if it's not getting better, you should probably get someone to take a look at it to make sure it's not infected.
Okay, so if it is infected, then I would just get like an antibiotic or something like that?
Exactly. If you had meningitis 8 days on, you wouldn't be on the phone talking to me. So I'm pretty sure it's not.
Yeah, I realize that. Okay, I will go to my doctor and get an appointment then. Thank you so much for this.
Have a nice day.
Appreciate it, Sheila. 902-405-6000 is the number, 902-405-6000. Black flies certainly are bad this time of the year, Dr. John, but I'm also hearing a lot of people picking up a lot of ticks when they're out enjoying Nova Scotia. Is that still, can you get that done at the pharmacy still, or is that something you have to go to the ER if you think you've been bitten by a tick, or what's the protocol for that?
Yeah, I mean, you can get it done at the pharmacy. I mean, I still believe we overreact. You do not need to get antibiotics just because you've been bitten by a tick. If it's been there for 24 hours or is engorged, or you're having symptoms, that's a reason to consider it. I think the biggest thing is to, if you're out in the woods or in the field or whatever you're doing, make sure you check yourself. And those things can get up in anywhere. So make sure you have a good check and make sure they're not around. But you're right, they seem to be proliferating this year. They're everywhere.
I read a story about a guy that picked 30 of them off his dog.
Yeah, we were digging some off our dog this week. He was out in the field in Lunenburg, and yeah, it was tick town.
No doubt. We're going to stop and take a break. Dr. John's going to be here on the other side of it. This is House Calls. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. All right, welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. This is House Calls. He is Dr. John Gillis. The telephone number is 902-405-6000. Very quickly before we go to the phone lines, thanks to Richard, who forwarded me the tweet from Bell Canada about that outage I mentioned off the top here. They are saying that some customers in Ontario and Quebec may be experiencing an internet service interruption. They're working to restore service as quickly as possible and are thanking us for our patience. Apparently it happened just before 10 o'clock. I'm assuming that's in Ontario time, so it would have been just moments ago. We will keep you updated on if we hear of anything that's happening in our part of the world. Again, this is House Calls, 902-405-6000. If you have a question for Dr. John, lots of lines to get on, just like Dave is going to do. We welcome Dave to the show. Dave, how are you?
Very good, thank you. Good morning, gentlemen. Regarding the Leafs, the Brad Marchand, local boy, Bedford, right?
Hammond's Plains, I thought, but yes.
I think he went to CPL, and my kids sort of went with him. And I think his mother was actually a teacher there, if I'm not mistaken. But regardless, good for him. I mean, he was undersized, and just basically his play, right? He's an irritant, and he can pot you some goals. And, really, when it came down to the Game 7s with Boston and Florida, he's won them all. He's just been a thorn in their side. But what I want to talk about is the shingles, if I may.
Sure.
A lot of talk on the radio about, I think our government is going to pour in millions of dollars to pay for the $400 shot, if I'm not, single shot.
65, age 65 and older was announced yesterday that the province will pick up the tab for them.
I think that's great because I think 1 in 3 get it, and it's very painful, and it probably takes up a lot of hospital space. But my question is, at 57, somehow I got my shingle shot. I don't think it's like you hit 65 and you get shingles. It can happen younger, and that's one of my questions: is how old is that time frame where you actually could start to get or encounter shingles, which is very painful. I understand. I don't even know what it is, quite frankly. But I did get my vaccine towards it at 57. I'm now 67. I was told that I don't need another one by one doctor, and then I've heard that I should get that updated. So where am I regarding the shingle shot? Should I get another one? How about that to start?
Yeah, so a couple things here. Shingles is caused by the herpes zoster virus, which is the same virus that causes chickenpox, and you can get both. You can get it again if you've already had it. And Shingrix, which is the vaccine, is recommended starting at age 50. So one of the issues, it's great. I applaud the government for covering it for over 65s, but it is recommended at age 50. So people from 50 to 65 are, forced to pay for it. It is more likely that people in that age group will have private insurance. But, we would like to see it covered for more people. But, hopefully we'll get there. This is a good step in the right direction. Most people say that the vaccine lasts for 10 years. So my typical recommendation is to repeat it after 10 years. The research isn't great. I think there's some number, going from memory around after 10 years to maybe around 70%, as opposed to, I think it's 95 after you get your 2 doses. So it's not unwise to repeat it, but you still do have some protection, I guess is probably the best answer I can give you.
Right. Now, you say it's part of the chickenpox, won't say family, but I don't know the term here. So it is related to chickenpox in some ways. Now, did we not have vaccinations, I think, when I was growing up, I actually had chickenpox, come to think of it. So if you've had chickenpox, is it mean that you're going to, is your risk higher to get shingles or less?
You can still get it, off the top of my head, statistically, I can't tell you the answer, but you can still get shingles if you've had chickenpox. So even if you've had chickenpox, you should still get vaccinated.
Thanks, Dave. We're going to move on. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Wally has a question. Wally, how are you?
Very well, thanks.
Your question, please.
I just have a comment about shingles. I had shingles in January of 24, so 17 months, and I still have nerve pain. I've tried every type of drug that they have. There is a patch available in the U.S. called Qutenza, but it's not in Canada yet. It probably won't be for years to come. But anybody that hasn't had the shingle shot, they should get it. I mean, it's unbelievable. I've had pain for 17 months now.
Yeah, no, the bad cases are really bad. And look, we see them, not all that often, but I see them in the pain clinic. I see them in the ER, and people describe it as, taking a blowtorch to your skin, just the nerve pain from it. Cutenza is capsaicin. Capsaicin is sort of a heat-inducing substance, which is available in Canada. The patch may not be, but you can get topical capsaicin here, and it is hard, but the pain is very hard to treat. So that highlights the need. Is both the nerve pain and sometimes the eye infections can be quite nasty. So it does highlight the reason to get your shingles vaccine. Just per the previous caller, the one thing I did want to clarify is theoretically, if you've never been exposed to the herpes zoster virus, meaning chickenpox or other, you theoretically might not get shingles, but the problem is a lot of people don't know. They may have had a mild case of chickenpox and not remembered it, not known it, that sort of thing. So the general thinking is if you're over 50, for all these reasons, including what we've just heard from the current caller, the severe pain that can come, get yourself vaccinated against shingles if you're able, and particularly if you're over 65 now because it's free.
Yeah, I'm over 65. I have found a patch. The Cutenza contains 8% capsicum, and the one I've found on Amazon has 2.8%. And believe me, it works like magic.
Well, that is good to know. I mean, like I said, I've used capsaicin for different pain syndromes in the past, but you're right. I haven't seen this one in Canada. How'd you manage to track it down, or is that classified?
I went to the pain clinic, and Dr. Cohen and I talked about it. He had used the Cutenza patch in the U.S., but I did some research, and there is a company in Canada that has the rights to it now as of February this year. But for some reason, they're not really planning on putting it on the market.
Interesting. Well, thanks for sharing the info with us, but it does highlight again the importance of if you can get that shingles vaccine, get her done.
Thanks, Wally.
Oh, yes. Bye.
902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000 is the number. He mentioned something about Amazon. Is it a good idea to get those kind of things off of a shopping site?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, Amazon is good for, I had hand surgery this week. I was looking on there for splints and some stuff, which I managed to source locally. But, there's some good supplies on there. There are some non-pharmaceutical strength drugs on there that, can be appropriate and effective. Again, it's like anything. You want to make sure the source, where it's being made, how it's being quality controlled. There are products that are, mainstream North American or European brands that are legally sold on Amazon. It depends on, the jurisdiction and the rules. But, there are things that are appropriate to buy on there, but just make sure you do the background.
902-405-6000 is the number, 902-405-6000. A story locally here, Dr. John, this week. Heard, or I guess it would have been the end of last week, we heard from the health minister about the free parking at the hospitals and the growing pains, they called it. What's your experience as a frontline person there at the hospital every day? What are you hearing about the free parking?
Don't hear much in Dartmouth. I tend to work at night, so I tend to park close to the ambulance bay. But in Dartmouth, it's not been too bad. But I guess the additional parking load in that area isn't that high. I think what we're seeing in downtown Halifax is parking's hard to find. It's expensive, and if there's a free lot there, people are just going to go in there and park, and without any means of policing that. Again, you don't want to charge people that have, I love the idea of people that have legitimate hospital business not getting charged, but, do you then put someone there and say, well, show me your appointment card, and, and then there's staffing costs and all the other things. So I think they're working through some of those growing pains. Like, again, I think the intention was good, but, if people have free parking downtown, they're going to use it seems.
We're going to stop and take another break for the news. Lots of questions coming up about the shingles vaccine. Dr. John's going to do his best to answer them on the other side of it. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. This is House Calls. We're back after the news. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand filling in for Todd here on a Wednesday. It is House Calls. Dr. John Gillis is here as well. If you have a medical-related question you'd like answered, here's your opportunity. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. If you'd like to get a question on, good time. There's a number of lines open. Let's head right back to the phones, Dr. John. We welcome Pat to the program. Pat, how are you?
I'm not too bad. How are you?
Good. Your question for Dr. John, please.
Yes, Dr. Gillis. I'm 76 years of age. For the last few months, my breasts, nipples in particular, have really feel inflamed, very, very tender, and a lot of itching. And I'm wondering what you think of that.
Well, the first question is, have you had it checked?
Not yet. I'm actually seeing my doctor within a short while.
Yeah, I mean, there's a list of things that it could be. It could be a local infection. It could be an inflammatory process, or something more serious. Breast cancer in men is relatively rare, but it's not impossible. Sometimes it's rarely medication related. Bites and that sort of thing can do it. There's a whole bunch of things. And is it both sides?
I'm sorry? Is it what?
Is it both sides?
Both breasts, yes. Now, in the last 5 years, I've had 3 siblings pass away with various cancers. One was esophageal, and the other 2 were with stomach cancer. My mother died of breast cancer at 55, and about 10 years ago, I had a GI, upper GI, and the doctor said I had Barrett's esophagus. So I'm just a little concerned because to say even if my shirt touches my nipples or whatever, it's very, very tender and sore.
Yeah, no, I mean, it could be any one of those things I mentioned, but it sounds like you're on the right track to get it checked out. So please do so as soon as you can.
Appreciate the call, Pat. Best of luck. 902-405-6000 is the number again. 902-405-6000. Dr. John, President Biden's diagnosis this week of an aggressive type of prostate cancer certainly brought that cancer back to the forefront in people's minds. I guess the best thing to do with prostate cancer is to get tested, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting, and to me, for a variety of reasons. Prostate cancer is generally a very slow-growing cancer, and by screening for it with blood tests, which is the prostate-specific antigen, rectal exams generally every 2 years, although the thinking on that seems to shift fairly frequently. By picking it up early, it's highly treatable and highly detectable before it gets to a serious stage. So that is very important, and why various campaigns to convince men who are stubborn and may not get checked to go do so, are very important. And we've improved the awareness, we've improved the uptake in testing. One of the controversies here is that how does somebody get to that advanced prostate cancer so quickly? As much as I hate to, ever agree with anything that comes out of Donald Trump Jr.'s mouth, on the surface, that's not wrong, but there are exceptions. So, typically something getting to that level would take a long period of time. However, there are some very aggressive forms of prostate cancer, and a good personal friend of mine who had prostate cancer was given a clean bill of health, was felt to be in remission, or at least if not cured, doing very well. Had a very aggressive recurrence and was gone within 6 months. So it does happen. And again, I'm not Joe Biden's doctor. I don't know what the details were. I do understand why some of these questions are being raised. Ultimately, the way it was raised was horrible, and ultimately you want to be empathetic with someone who's ill and who's suffering, and that probably should have been, definitely should have been first. But there's some layers here that are important to understand.
As I understand it, the cancer that he has spread from his prostate into his bones. Is that common?
It's common when it's advanced, and again, usually that takes a very long time. The typical person who gets picked up with prostate cancer has a very local occurrence in their prostate or maybe in the tissue near the prostate. Typically, when it's in the bones, it means it's been missed or it's recurred. And again, these are why people are asking questions. How does somebody with access to the best health care on the planet probably have it missed? That's a fair question. Was there a case that was there before and it recurred? That's possible. Was it a very aggressive form that just came? It is possible. Statistically, not highly likely. So, there are questions. But again, thinking about the person, the man, and the family, hopefully first.
Absolutely. What kind of prognosis would somebody have when he gets to this stage? Are there treatment available? Is there treatment available when it's already starting to spread into his bones?
Yeah, I mean there are treatments. Again, I'm colored by what I saw with my friend who just was fine and then was gone in his mid-60s. But there are chemotherapy options. We treat prostate cancer with a combination of surgery, radiation, and chemo. When it's spread into the bones, surgery is not typically going to help unless it's for symptom control. Radiation, again, for local symptom control. The mainstay would be chemo. But again, we're in the reeds here of, very specific subtypes of, rare or aggressive forms of prostate cancer. And again, just without having all the details, I don't want to speculate too much. Hopefully former President Biden gets treated and does well.
Just one last question, Dr. John. If somebody is in that age range, 50 and over, and doesn't have a family doctor, which is common around here, how does one go about getting an exam, a blood test, those kind of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and again, I mostly hear that the online services will do blood tests and follow up on them. I've heard good feedback. So, I mean, a minimum, you should be able to get a PSA blood test done. It's hard to get a, finger put in your behind to check your prostate on the internet. If someone's figured that one out, then I've missed that. But, the PSA is a good screening test, and that's a starting point. And if that locates something, then further follow-up can occur.
Bottom line, just get it done.
Get her done.
Also read this week, Dr. John, that the province has said that the launch of everybody's electronic medical records is being delayed. Not sure if that impacts your day-to-day, obviously, but it'll be a good thing once that system's up and running, that we'll have access to our own records, right?
Yeah, ultimately the ease of information for everybody, patients, practitioners, everybody is going to make things better. It's just, trying to get different systems to talk to each other, maintain privacy, deal with a great bulk of data. And this is not isolated to here. It's been a challenge. I mean, we still use faxes for things. And, there are people, some of our listeners, especially the younger set, probably have never seen or used a fax machine, but here we are.
Is that something you would use in the ER? Is that record system once it's up and running? I think we lost Dr. John. That's what that tone was. Vanessa's going to work to... I'll tell you what, Vanessa, we'll take a break. We'll get Dr. John back on the air, and then we'll get back to the phone lines. You're listening to House Calls on the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. All right, I think we got Dr. John back on the line. Let's see if he's there. Dr. John. Come in, Dr. John.
I'm here.
I don't know what happened, but it's technology, right? We can't get our medical records sorted. We can't figure out a phone here at the station. Anyway, it's all good. 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. Let's get Greg onto the air. Greg, how are you?
Dr. Van, boys, how is everybody doing today?
Good. What's on your mind?
I got a question for Dr. John. Dr. John, I was at a Blue Jays game back actually in the 1st of April, around the first week of April. Anyways, I'm not I can't say I'm very active. I mean, I do a bit of walking here and there, but needless to say, I caught a foul ball. I lunged out of my seat and caught the foul ball. But after I caught the foul ball, my elbow was excruciating. To move it, to bend it, to put any kind of pressure on it was absolutely horrendous. Now, I got home and never really thought about it, to flex, to put, if I was to flex my bicep, the pressure on the elbow is awful. And then I banged it off of a garbage can outside of my apartment building. And if you could have seen the bruising that I experienced from, I don't know if it was because if I tore something or when I banged it after hurting it because of a foul ball, the bruising was absolutely incredible. And still to this day right now, I know there's something called the bursa sac. I don't know much about it. But I know right now, like yesterday, I was trying to shake up a ketchup bottle. I cannot shake anything with the elbow. I can't put any kind of pressure on it when I lay down. I do have an appointment next Wednesday. I was wondering, what do you think? Could have, would the bursa sac, if I was to injure the bursa sac or burst it, does that, cause as much pain as I've had? Any idea?
Yeah, so the bursa is a sac of fluid that's typically at the tip of your elbow, what we call the olecranon bursa. That's something that typically swells up and, people say it looks like they got a golf ball under their skin.
Yeah.
If you have that degree of swelling, it could be bursitis. The other common injuries are to the medial epicondyle, which is where, the tendons and the nerve go on the inside of the elbow or on the outside, golfers and tennis elbow. So often it's a movement that inflames those things, sometimes made worse by trauma. In your case, smacking a garbage can. Maybe you had too many beers at the Blue Jays game and you were overusing that elbow, or too many kombuchas, because not everybody drinks beer at the Blue Jays game. You inflamed something there. The treatment typically, is conservative, ice, anti-inflammatories, sometimes bracing, but I mean, I guess ultimately having someone look at it to determine where they think the problem is. And, if those things don't work, sometimes physio with some local, laser, ultrasound, needling, or sometimes a cortisone shot is required to settle it down. But it really depends where the exact problem is, and, ultimately getting someone to look at it if it's ongoing. There's a lot of injuries after the Leafs game the other night from people wanting to beat their heads off the wall in frustration. Right. So at least you didn't miss that with the Blue Jays.
Greg, appreciate the call, sir, and congrats on catching a foul ball. That's not easy to do. Anyway, hope that gets worked out for you. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. We had a caller earlier today, Dr. John, that mentioned Dr. Google, and I think you and I have talked about this in the past before, but how can we effectively use something like that to get good information as opposed to some of the other stuff that is on the internet these days?
Well, I think it's partially, probably two major things. Finding credible sources, and even that statement in this day and age is tough. What's a credible source? Is Fox News a credible source? We might have thought so 10 years ago, but on the other side, people feel that way about other news outlets. But parking that, medical sites that are affiliated with, established medical institutions like the Mayo Clinic website, the Cleveland Clinic website, the Center for Disease Control, WebMD is another one that I like to use that, have resourced information that is evidence-based and science-based, and that can point people in the right direction, but are also careful in their language to say, here's information, but, it needs to be put into context. And, this is what's most important is information is good. Understanding your health is good. Some people take what they read and overcall it. Some people undercall it. Aneurysms are associated with headaches. I have a headache, therefore I'm having an aneurysm.
Right.
Well, you're probably not, but, in certain cases that would be reasonable to look it up. There are people who have classic cases of, chest pain that go along with something that's maybe serious and cardiac, but they read something and they say, well, no, it's not that. I've got heartburn. So context is important, based on your age, risk, and, how persistent your symptoms are. Knowing when to get checked is key. So information is useful, but information needs to be put into context, like with anything, whether it's, a problem with a car or anything mechanical or many things in life. It can be something serious. It could be something minor. Context is important.
And you can drive yourself right down a rabbit hole if you keep digging, right?
100%.
902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. Speaking of headaches, Dr. John, seasonal allergy season is definitely in full swing around here. What do you recommend for people that are dealing with those stuffy noses and watery eyes and all this pollen and stuff that's floating around?
Yeah, so, I mean, the obvious first thing is if there's anything in your environment that is contributing to it, get rid of it. Whether it's dust, whether it's, pet dander, whatever you might be allergic to, try and identify that. Obviously you can't control what's outside, especially when things are blooming and such. But that's when you look to, conservative treatment, decongestants, antihistamines, sometimes steroid nasal sprays to help manage the symptoms. In severe cases, some people need, desensitization shots to whatever they're allergic to, whether it's, again, hay fever, pollen, dust, that sort of thing. And there are options available for that. So it is, avoid what you can, treat the minor cases with, conservative measures. And if it's more serious than that, look to some desensitization therapy and some, more advanced means of managing the allergies from an allergy specialist or an allergy clinic.
How important is it to get diagnosed to what you're allergic to? The reason why I asked that question is there are a bunch of stubborn people, and I've got my arm up in the air here, that just say, oh, well, I get this every year, no big deal. Can your quality of life improve if you know what you're allergic to and how to treat it?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can avoid it, when to treat it, or, as I said, in some cases, there's, shots or things available to, take away that trigger or desensitize your body to it so that it doesn't affect you. It comes down to how much it is. I mean, if I'm somewhere that's full of pollen and really humid, yeah, I'll get congested, but it really bothers me enough that, I need anything more than a Claritin with a bit of decongestant in it for a couple days. It's not a big impact in my life, but there are people who are, debilitated by it. They're congested. It affects their asthma, causes puffy eyes, all those things. So again, it depends how it affects the individual and how we react to it.
Dr. John, we're out of time. Hope you have a fantastic week.
Very best. Take care.
That is Dr. John Gillis. He's here every Wednesday to answer your medical-related questions. We're going to get ready to stop down and take a break here for the news, and on the other side of it, we're going to throw open the telephone lines for the Mid-Week Meltdown. Question that I'm curious as to your response today is this business with the post office. We've been hearing since, I guess, Monday that the union that represents postal workers in Canada, I think there's 55,000 of them, that's CUP W, is given strike notice that if they don't get back to the bargaining table or don't get to an agreement by Friday at midnight, so 12:01 Friday morning, then CUP W members will again be on the picket line. This is the second time in 6 months. Last time, the only reason it ended is because it was legislated. My question to you is this. If you believe the Canada Post side of the argument, that they're broke, that they're losing money literally hand over fist, and they need to change their business model in order to compete in today's world, and again, this is my opinion, am not a fan of a crown corporation like Canada Post competing against private entities. The private entities, of course, being the courier companies and the delivery companies and everything else. Because let's face it, Canada Post doesn't run on delivering that electric bill once a month anymore. This isn't your grandfather's post office. I guess I should say your grandparents' post office, right? Do you remember that? And I know I'm going to be the old guy in a rocking chair on a porch here, but I remember when the post delivery person came to my front door, there was a mitt full of envelopes in their hands when I was a kid. In fact, we used to bother them for the rubber bands, right? That is not the case anymore. Canada Post is recognizing that, I think, and saying that they have to change their business model in order to survive. They're losing, and it's gobs of money they are losing every quarter. They're saying they need a 7-day work week. The union doesn't want to do that. Is it time that Canada Post is privatized? 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. That or whatever you want to talk about. It's the beauty of the open hour. You get to lead the discussion. We're going to stop for the news. Blake's going to update us on what's going on the other side of it. We'll throw open those telephone lines. 902-405-6000 is the number. Midweek Meltdown after the news. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. This is the Mid-Week Meltdown. Your chance to talk about whatever it is on your mind. The lines are open. 902-405-6000 is the number. 902-405-6000. And before we get started, a couple of orders of business I need to, points of order, as they would say in the legislature, that I definitely need to take into account and get done and out of the way. Very first one is a very, very, very happy birthday to Mr. Bill Mott. Bill, of course, a longtime caller to this program. A little bird told me that Mr. Mott is turning 96 today. So happy birthday, Bill. And also, hello to Nora up in Fredericton, who sent me a note offering a bandwagon application to join the Oilers fan club. No thanks, but I appreciate the thought. And also very rightly reminded me to send some congratulations, and I'll do that now, to the Moncton Wildcats, who won the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League and will represent the Q at the Memorial Cup this year. Congratulations to that whole organization and to all those former Mooseheads that are currently on their roster. Couldn't have done it without them. Anyway, congratulations to the Moncton Wildcats. 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. One of the questions I'm curious about today is your thoughts on the post office. What do we do with Canada Post? Looks like there could be a strike happening here for the second time in 6 months, and that could happen as early as Friday. Is it time to get rid of Canada Post and privatize it? 902-405-6000. We welcome Don to the program. Don, how are you?
Oh, not bad, not bad.
Your thoughts on the post office?
Well, Dan, your comment about grandparents sitting in their rocking chairs, sitting home, I take a little bit of offense to that because I am a grandparent. I'm 78, and there's a great many of us that are that age, and we have enough job paying to try to keep our homes going with insurance and taxes.
Right.
But we can't afford to buy a computer and pay internet fees just so we can get our bills. So I do appreciate having my mail delivered to me so I can pay my bills, and I'm sure there's a lot of other seniors out there in the same boat.
And I'll agree with you, Don, and I'm not suggesting we should get rid of mail delivery. I just think that maybe it's time that Canada Post becomes a private company.
Well, a private company, I don't think there's a private company out there that would deliver the mail.
And that's a fair point.
I don't think you'll find one. I don't see them biting at the bit to turn around and put their name in to try to come up with a solution for it. So
you're for keeping the post office where it is?
Well, they're talking about cutting down the mail delivery. I can see them cutting down the mail delivery to maybe twice a week rather than every day. Mm-hmm. But it's still a hard trek for us seniors to get across the road 2 streets over to pick up our mail, so it's not delivered to the door anymore.
Yeah, right.
It's not really a hardship on these fellas driving around in their vehicles now to put mail in the box.
Not like it used to be, right, Don, where they came right to your door.
That's right, and I think they can't even get the right letters in the right mailbox.
That's true too.
I mean, they're not. I can't see that they're stressed in doing that job, so I can't see them even having the right to turn around and complain about it. I think they're well paid for what they get, and with the company in as bad shape as it is, I think the unions turn around and step back and say, "Hey, let's try to solve this, and let's try to agree to have some part-time work on the weekends to deliver their parcels and whatnot." I don't think the post office is too far off from what they're asking for. It's a little bit of what they're asking for.
Okay, Don, anyway, appreciate it, sir.
I appreciate getting my mail, and like I say, I hope to hell it never comes to the point that we have to buy a computer, because I don't know how we're going to put that in our mailbox, in our account.
Fair enough, Don. Tough to stuck it in the mailbox. I appreciate your call, sir.
Okay, bye now.
Have a good one. 902-405-6000 is the number, 902-405-6000. I'm not suggesting we get rid of mail delivery. Not at all. I'm just suggesting that in 2025, letter mail doesn't pay the bills for Canada Post anymore. And in order to do that, they've entered into and are competing now against private companies to deliver parcel mail is where it's at. Let's face it, that is where the bread is buttered now. And I'm never going to be a fan of a crown corporation that gets funding competing against a private company, regardless of what you think of FedEx and UPS and Amazon and all of those companies. But they're still competing against them. Is it time that we take a look at Canada Post, and is it time for that corporation to become private? 902-405-6000. Let's welcome Dave to the program. Dave, how are you, sir?
Yes, I just want to tap into your last comment, if I may.
Sure.
What about CBC, where the taxpayer finances and the Liberals pumped a bunch more money into that?
Something they should be looking at. I've always said that we need a CBC, but I think that it needs to either be completely doing what it's doing on government money and not competing against private radio, because it is right now.
Well, yeah, you're working for a private company, if I'm not mistaken.
You are right, sir.
Yeah, and they have to pay their bills and what have you. And CBC, our tax money's gone into it, thanks to the Liberals once again.
Well, it's not necessarily fair, Dave, because it's been funded by many forms of government over the years. It's not just the Liberals.
Well, maybe it's time. Well, they're not hesitating to keep it going. Now, keep in mind, these companies, including Canada Post, employ a lot of people.
Absolutely do.
Canada Post, I think, is 55,000.
They
right?
do.
So, and I think you had a spokesperson on, or Todd did, speaking on behalf of small business.
Right.
They lost over $1 billion, and small business has suffered immensely, has it not? Over from COVID to everything else.
If they go on strike, they'll suffer. Certainly will. Yep.
Yeah, and here we go again, right? So there is some importancy to, because they say it's the cheapest by far than UPS or Pure Later. I think that's part of Post Office. I'm not too sure how that works, but far cheaper, is it not? I believe they say they use Canada Post to send their mailings, whether it's letter form or parcel form. So, and here's another thing, though. I mean, in the big scheme of things, and I don't want to get sidetracked here, but we're basically every week we're financing our national debt to $1 billion a week, $54 billion a year to service our $1 trillion deficit. And it's only going to get deeper, is the way I see it, with this government. And another thing, if you don't mind me saying, I don't want to get into a S show here, but we're also pumping money in Ukraine to keep their infrastructure going, their payroll, their pensions, and what have you. And you can say, well, it's coming from whatever. The fact is, we have given Ukraine billions of dollars in weaponry and what have you. So where is the priority? We have middle-income people lining up at food banks, never seen before in this country. And every day I listen to Todd, people are struggling out there. And it's not the first world problem. Well, it's first world problem. No, it's not. I mean, you can look out, I think your region up there, I go to Canada Games, we have a village of homeless in behind Canada Games, squeezed in there. And more and more and more, you see homeless everywhere. And it's, we got to, my mother used to say, she lived through the Depression as a little girl, Dan, and she said, charity begins at home. And when it comes to Canada Post, they could certainly streamline it and maybe break it down into 3 days. And maybe they're just going to have to accept that part-time is the way to go. But I don't think it's time to rid it. If we can finance a war, we can finance people employed here, because those are very good jobs. I would say half-decent jobs. I don't think they're very good jobs anymore, to be honest with you, Dan. But and look at CBC, right? Same thing. I mean, do we really need it? Maybe it should provide like PBS, it should be sponsored perhaps. But we're in it now because we got a Liberal government that seems to be wanting to throw money around. And at the G7, they even said they're going to put more money in Ukraine to help them rebuild. So when that starts, it's a winless war at this point in time, if you don't mind me. I'm very frustrated with the whole thing. We all are.
Dave, I appreciate it, sir.
Thanks, Dan.
Have a good one. 902-405-6000 with the CBC question, and I think I've mentioned this on the air before, and I know many people that work in the industry have said the same thing. I think that this country needs a CBC. I think that this country needs to have a strong and a robust CBC. I really do. But what the CBC needs to do is it needs to be run more like a business. the CBC also needs to stop competing against the private sector. The next time you log on to the CBC's website, how many commercials are you going to watch to see that news story? That's ad revenue. And if a corporation is going to take a subsidy from the government, then it shouldn't be able to compete against private enterprise that this radio station is part of, are competing against. It's just not a level playing field. I truly believe we need a CBC. I really do. They do some things that nobody else does in this country, and they do it well. But the playing field has to be level. And as I said at the beginning of the show, and I will say about Canada Post, and I'll continue to say after we take our break, Vanessa's yelling at me, is that a crown corporation should not be competing against a private company. 902-405-6000. The Midweek Meltdown continues on the other side of the break. This is the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Mid-Week Meltdown. I'm Dan Alstrand, filling in for Todd here on the Todd Veinotte Show. Today, the curious case of the post office. With another strike on the horizon, could happen as soon as 12:01 Friday morning. We could have the second strike in 6 months. Is it time that we take a close look at the post office, and is it time that it becomes a private company? 902-405-6000. Let's go to the phone lines and welcome James to the show. James, how are you?
Good, man. How are you?
Good. What's on your mind?
Just in regards to both those topics. I mean, when you zoom way out, like governments propping up certain industry sectors. Like let's look at the post office, for example. If you historically look at it, it was an information distribution network, right? There was a barrier of information just in distance itself, the physical distance from where the news was generated to where the news was consumed. Well, that was a massive barrier. So introduced post office work, which is hundreds of years old as far as the practice is concerned. But if they had the internet, then they probably never would have invented the postal service. You know what I'm saying?
No, I hear you. I get it. It was the way that we communicated in the and I'm putting quotes around this in the old days. The phones were expensive, where most people didn't have them. It was the only way we could communicate.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, legal documentation, like
right
now, like you can buy a house sight unseen on a Fenta sign, and I mean, we're only on the tip of the iceberg as where technology is headed. Now, I also understand it's laborious for seniors to adapt to that, but I mean, at the same time, if you, like my aunt was a postal worker for 40 years, 85 to 90% of the content that goes in their bags when they walk around is advertising. So if you got private industry relying on distribution of their, I wouldn't call it propaganda, but like if Walmart is printing flyers in the mail to come to our door, well, I don't feel like taxpayers, 55,000 jobs is a lot of jobs to distribute flyers for Canadian Tire. So I feel like if that money could be distributed in other ways to reduce the barriers of information for those that are vulnerable, because I tell you right now, as a 45-year-old father of 6, I don't know where my mail key is. I don't go to the mailbox. So, like, it's not relevant to me, and I'm in the career field, multiple properties. I've got children in sports and recreation. I'm working multiple jobs. I don't go to the mailbox. So, as a contributor to society, I don't really feel like when I hear these arguments about Canada Post, and I know their schedule, I'm like, you guys are complaining about your job? Like, it blows my mind. Now, I understand I don't work there, so I don't know what they're complaining about, but at the same time, I'm like, man, it's technology is going to outpace that position really fast. I'd be grateful if I still had a job there. And then in regards to CBC, I mean, I think you're right. We need a CBC. I don't necessarily know that it needs to be the government's responsibility or the taxpayers' responsibility to prop up a media network. I mean, like, when there was no competition and that sector was maturing in its infancy, that was very important. Similar to what we're reaching here with this Canada Post debate. If it needs to be propped up by the government, then you have to wonder why, right? Because other media agencies like yourself don't rely on subsidies. You guys are performance-based and you do a good job, right? And you don't appear to have bias, you know? So that's all I look for in a media outlet, is a non-biased, consistent source. So,
James, I appreciate it. Anyway, sir, as a father,
again,
as a father of 6, I know your time is light. So, all the best to you, brother.
Yeah. Take care.
902-405, 6 kids, my goodness. 902-405-6000, it's 902-405-6000. Where are we here? Let's go to Greg. Greg, how are you?
I'm doing fine, Dan. How are you?
I'm well. What's on your mind today, sir?
Well, I think woke culture has just gone a bit too far in regards to mail carriers, Dan.
Okay. What do you mean?
Well, think about it. I mean, men should be able to carry mail just as much as women, don't you think?
Okay, they do.
I'm just kidding. I'm sorry, Dan. I'm kidding. Look, that's not why I called. I called because I'm sorry. I couldn't help it. It was a bad joke, but I couldn't.
It was a very bad joke, Greg.
Yes, I know. Sometimes the bad ones are the good ones. But
your opinion. Anyway,
called...
what's on your mind about the post office, and for real this time?
Yeah. So I think the idea, one of your callers was saying about money and how it's allocated and how it goes to Ukraine or other entities. Mm-hmm. But with regards to the post office and other kind of corporations, whether it's private or public, you're seeing the disintegration, I think, anyway, of living wages. And so I never really was a big supporter of the post office. They just seem to go, I'm getting older, and they seem to be on strike all the time. And they seem to have a good gig. And then that started to be torn away bit by bit. And now you have people working at franchise post offices in Shoppers or elsewhere. I just think that regardless of who owns it, and this goes with business in general, you're seeing this incredible payday for the people who run the businesses, and then this getting down to minimum wage and even fighting what minimum wage is on the other end. So my opinion is the bigger picture is we just have to make sure and push back a little bit on making sure that people get a living wage, regardless of who owns that or any business. It's just getting carried away at where we're at now. There's just very few people who can afford the basics.
Richard, appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.
902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. A couple of emails I want to pass along here before we take our next break. This one comes to us from Mark. It says, how many more work stoppages are we going to have to face after this walkout ends? Of course, I pushed the wrong button and lost it. There it is. There is no end in sight here. Canada Post is way too top-heavy, and unless something changes, strikes will continue into the future and beyond, and taxpayers will be on the hook for bailing them out endlessly. Canada Post is out of touch and out of time, in my opinion. That one comes from Mark, and this one from Rob. Privatized Canada Post would have no incentive to deliver the mail and parcels to rural Canada, where it's not cost-effective for couriers. It's false dichotomy that we have to either accept massive costs or privatization. How about streamlining Canada Post so that it's cost-effective and fills the gaps that private businesses will never fill? Phase out home delivery, allow postal banking, etc. The union needs to wake up and realize that systemic change in the organization is critical. And that one is from Rob. 902-405-6000. What to do with Canada Post? The Midweek Meltdown will continue on the other side of the break. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. We are back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. This is the Midweek Meltdown, 902-405-6000. I have to share a story with you that happened during the break. I was walking towards the back of the radio station, and somebody I hadn't seen for a while said hi, and I was pouring myself a glass of water, and he made a crack about President Trump yesterday announcing the Golden Dome, right? The Golden Dome that goes over top of America. It's going to be like the Iron Dome, and it's missile defense and space, Star Wars, and all that stuff. And he said, geez, Dan, when we were talking about the Golden Dome, I thought he was talking about the top of your head. For those of you that don't know, I'm follically challenged. Anyway, it's Wednesday, right? 902-405-6000. I digress. 902-405-6... I just thought it was funny. 902-405-6000 is the number. What to do with the curious case of Canada Post? Is it time to privatize the post office? Let's get back to the phones and welcome Richard to the program. Richard, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, Dan. How are you?
I'm okay. What's on your mind?
Just about the post office, obviously. I could rebuke facts that some people have spewed on there today, but I won't. Like the guy with 6 kids. I mean, he said 85 to 90% of what they deliver is flyers, which is just totally not true. You guys have it on your commercial. I mean, just a minute ago, it says 300 million parcels a year, however many billion letters a year. So, I mean, obviously there's still a revenue stream there to be had, and it's very large.
Fair.
But the bigger issue, I would say, is corporations such as CBC, such as Canada Post, Air Canada, paying out bonuses to all their executives and their corporate employees when they're constantly losing money.
Agreed, 100%.
And why is that not in the report? It's probably because the government and Canada Post put Kaplan in to do the report. So, I mean, obviously there needs to be changes made, but I think it's fairly one-sided, the information that's being put out there.
So should it be privatized or should it stay as a Crown Corp?
No, it should stay as a Crown Corp, but I think they need to eliminate some of the fat at the top, possibly.
Didn't that just seem to be systemic, though? And some of the things you mentioned, Air Canada and CBC and Canada Post, it seems that when we have these crown corporations in Canada that they get very top-heavy very quickly, and
right.
And they don't seem to find a way to get rid of that.
No, and they don't seem to way to, get bailed out by the government and turn around and hand that money to their executives.
Right, no, I get it. Understand.
So I don't know, maybe both sides kind of need to give a bit, but it seems like the union was willing to give, I think the union already gave them the weekend delivery thing, and it's being put out in the news that weekend delivery is the sticking point, but that's really not the sticking point. It's more about job loss, raises, all that kind of benefits are getting worse.
I don't understand how there could be job loss if we're adding 2 shifts on a week. I've never understood that. That got talked about last time around too. I never understood.
Well, here's what would probably happen. I can't say for certain, but if you're delivering the parcels on the weekend,
right,
that alleviates a lot of work that someone who comes in on Monday would be doing. And then they obviously do less work through the week if there's more being processed on the weekend. So that person's shift might be cut back, or they might want to say, oh, well, these routes are getting lighter, so they can change them to part-time jobs. Right. Or, it's mainly the fight for full-time jobs is what it is. It's not necessarily that they don't want to be able to give them the delivery on the weekend. They already have that ability. They do that November, December every year already.
Right.
But I believe they have to pay them overtime wages, right?
Yeah, and that'll certainly.
So they want to pay someone $20 an hour instead of paying a 30-year person time and a half.
And I understand some resistance from the 30-year seniority guy that may have to work on the weekend, right?
Right. But I haven't heard them really complaining about the fact that someone might have to work on the weekend. Like they had Jim Gallant on CTV, and he was all for the weekend delivery. It's how it's being implemented and how they want to implement it.
Richard, great call, sir. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.
Have a good one. 902-405-6000. Lines are wide open if you want to get in on this debate over the post office. I got an email from Lee who writes, hi. Layoffs have to happen, in reference to Canada Post. Would also move mail delivery to 2. He says, I would, being him, would also move mail delivery to 2 days a week. That way a carrier could cover 2 zones. Carriers need to be accountable to their time. They also need to work their full shift. If they only work a 6-hour day but are getting paid for 8s, well, that jumps to a $24 an hour job, now making $30 an hour. I would have community boxes for everyone. I know many people don't like those community boxes. When Canada Post quotes mail delivery, how much of that is junk mail? Should they be tracking stamp sales and not junk mail delivery? Thanks. And that is from Lee. 902-405-6000 is the number. 902-405-6000. We've got about 20 minutes left here in Wide Open Lines if you want to get in. This and anything else that that crosses your mind that you like to talk about, here's a perfect opportunity to do so. One of the stories that caught my attention today when we were in the newscast this morning was the announcement yesterday, or I don't even know if it's an announcement. It was probably best to describe it as a ceremony to open up the brand new refurbished transit facility at Ragged Lake. That happened yesterday. Halifax Transit saying that they have now 60 electric buses on the roads here in Halifax, and that phase one of their plan is now done for the electrification of Halifax Transit. So I understand it, that number, and I stand to be corrected, was 200, I think, was the end game for the buses. The next phase of the program is another $20 million of upgrades and renovations out at Bears Lake at the transit facility there to allow them to fuel both the diesel buses that the majority of them are, and to fuel, is that the way you say it? Charge maybe the electric buses out there, as well as, and this was the interesting part to me, they say that part of phase two is that they're going to give themselves the ability, they're not going to put it into practice, but they're going to give themselves the ability to use other kinds of fuels for buses. And the two examples that Halifax Transit put out on their website was hydrogen, which is interesting, and natural gas. So that is part of a $20 million upgrade that's coming now as part of phase two out at Bears Lake. Let's try Burnside, Dan. Not Bears Lake, Burnside. And that is scheduled to take part from now until 2028, I do believe. And the $20 million, and don't quote me, but this is from memory, is being split three ways on the federal government, the provincial government, and the municipality, I think, is kicking in $7 million for that. Electrification of buses is here. It's continuing, and I know many of you have talked about electric buses here in the past. We're going to stop down. There's a few of you on the line. We're going to stop down, take a break, and get back to the phones on the other side. You're listening to the Mid-Week Meltdown on the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. We're back in minutes. All right, about 10 minutes left here in the Midweek Meltdown. The lines, lots of them open for you. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Canada Post, Halifax Transit buses, whatever's on your mind. Here's an opportunity to get it off your chest as we head through the latter part of the Midweek Wednesday edition of the program. Again, 902-405-6000. Back to the phones. We welcome Chris to the show. Chris, how are you?
Not bad. How are you, Dan?
I'm doing well. What's on your mind?
Good. Well, you just happened to mention electric buses, and that's one of my favorite topics because I hate the thought of having to pay for them.
Already
Not
paid for it.
The thought. Already paid. No, the ones. Yeah, it's already paid, but we, the taxpayer, have already paid for it. Yeah. There's my understanding is there's 332 full-size buses.
Is it 300? I wasn't sure. I knew it was in the triple digits somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's 332. Might be 342, but anyway, who's counting on 10? There's the 5 ferries that they control. This is the Transit Authority.
Yep.
And also you've got 40 or 45 Accessa buses.
Yep.
To electrify, and their plan to replace all these eventually is electrification, of course. And that's going to cost a huge amount of money. By calculation of what they've already spent for the first 60, it's going to be between somewhere 650 to 700 million, up to maybe $1 billion.
Okay.
This Ragged Lake, which we can't afford. I mean, with everything else, we just can't afford.
But it's not the city that's footing that bill itself, is it?
Oh, Dan, don't fall for that one. Like they all say it. But it's the taxpayer. There's one taxpayer.
No, I get it. But it's disingenuous to say that the city's paying $1 billion because it really isn't.
Okay. Then let's talk that one out.
Sure.
The city could better use that money for other things, could they not?
Oh, I agree.
Like our crumbling infrastructure and so on. So why not negotiate a little more with the provincial and the federal governments for money? And say, look, we're not necessarily going to do our electric buses right now because it's not. We have other priorities. Use the money for other things. That Ragged Lake facility was supposed to be opened up quite some time ago. 6-8 months ago, it was supposed to be on stream. I was talking to someone with Metro Transit, and what they told me in confidentiality was that there was a delay in getting that done because they didn't build the thing high enough. The ceilings had to be retrofitted after they did the renovations in their build because they neglected to take into consideration that the electric buses have the battery on the top of the bus. And for servicing or replacement, they needed higher ceilings, which they didn't initially build when they undertook this electrification project about 2 years ago now. Whether that's 100% true or not or whatever, but it came directly from someone inside Metro Transit told me personally that. I've known this person for years. Also, they said they have been testing out some of the electric buses, and part of the reason that they kept that charging facility on the Ragged Lake side was that after a shift, which is about 4 hours, they need to charge, time and charge to get them back over to Burnside, it wasn't going to work. So I think that this bears a lot more checking out before we go and hawk for any more than the 60 that we've already got. That's a lot of money. And in other areas, I know Edmonton, certain areas, they don't work out as well, but they have it colder out there and stuff like that. So time will tell, and we'll see. But it's all, I suspect that the Ragged Lake building has run over budget since the renovations that needed to be done that weren't forlayed upon or wasn't planned upon first. And I can't believe they would do that, build a building and not get the specs on the height of the buses to get them in there. But anyway, that's what I was told by Metro Transit and or an individual with Metro Transit who should know what's going on out there.
Right. Well, maybe somebody out there knows if you're right or wrong, Chris. I have no idea.
Yeah, I'd like to know that too.
Awesome. Appreciate the call, sir.
Dan, thank you.
902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. The electric bus issue certainly has been a topic of discussion on this program for many, many years now. And maybe I have, and I probably have, but I just never noticed. Apparently there's 60 of them on the road now, and I had to look up the picture this morning when we were talking about it to see what they look like, because I don't remember seeing one. That doesn't mean that I haven't seen one, because normally when I'm on the road, I'm driving and I'm paying attention to the road, and I'm not looking to see what the design of the buses are. But I'd be very curious to if Chris is correct, and I don't know if he is or not. I have to take him at his word, I guess. But you know, if there was a problem with the construction out at Ragged Lake, and if this thing is over budget, then maybe somebody that is within Halifax Transit or maybe a counselor that is in the know can give us a call and let us know if that is in fact the case. And if it's not, then let's just clear the air. We've got 10 minutes left here and wide open lines. 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. I got an email. It's rather lengthy from Gordon. I'm not going to read it word for word. I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit just for the sake of time. But Gordon is a strong proponent of getting rid of the post office. He said that when Halifax Post. Canada Post, getting confused. It's been a long day. Went on strike in the Christmas time last year, or I guess it was last year. And he heard a lot of families, and he said that he moved his mailbox. Doesn't use Canada Post, moved his mailbox. He doesn't have to see the mail person anymore, and thinks that it's high time that Canada Post is privatized because of the damage that these strikes do. Now, there's been some reporting done this morning and throughout the day today that Canada Post may be ready. If it hasn't already happened, that's tough to tell from in here, but if Canada Post hasn't already, will today later table a new offer to CUP W, which is, of course, for those of you who don't know, is the union that represents postal workers in the country. The union has said, and I think somebody had quoted the interview yesterday on CTV from the union rep, said that if a new proposal came from Canada, they've stopped talking, which I never a fan of, because if you're not talking, you're not negotiating, and you're never going to come to a solution, particularly if this thing gets out into the media, right? And negotiating through the media, as much as it fuels my business, it's never good for a cooler heads prevail, I'll say, just to put the exclamation point on that. That all being said, the union said yesterday that if they do get a new offer before their strike deadline on Friday, that they could, and that this word is driving me crazy, pause. Thank you, President Trump. Pause this strike and maybe push it off a few days and to get a look at that contract. So make sure you stay tuned, because if that does in fact happen today, then maybe we'll see a delay in in this labor action. If we don't, or if they do not, then we will see picket lines, as I understand it, at 12:01 Friday morning. So on the way to work Friday, you might see those picket lines and burning barrels and all that stuff up again that we saw in December. I truly believe that it's time that we take a closer look at our crown corporations, and we really need to run them more like businesses. And I know that that's been the buzzwords as of late. Prime Minister Carney taking some heat for saying that he wants to run cabinet like a business and that wants to run government like a business, but we really do, right? The never-ending money train only comes out of yours and my wallet. And when we continue to just keep feeding money into an organization that is hemorrhaging funds, and if you believe the numbers from Canada Post, they are hemorrhaging funds. The amount of money is astronomical. And that's only coming out of your and my wallets. And as Chris said, with regards to Halifax Transit, that money can be much better spent somewhere else, right? If we're going to follow through on some of these promises that were made during the election campaign, we're going to have to spend an awful lot of money on things that Canadians need, like housing and those kind of things. And if we're going to spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on floating a corporation that has really no, in its current form, has no chance of being successful, it just doesn't make any sense, does it? It really doesn't. Just want to pass along a couple of programming notes. We're getting here close to the top of the hour. Make sure that you have your radio on tomorrow on 95.7 because I think it's at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. There will be a special guest in the studio with Todd, and that special guest will be the Premier of Nova Scotia. Tim Houston will be here for 1 hour on tomorrow at 11 o'clock, right, Vanessa? 11 o'clock till noon, answering your questions. He's done this before. It is very popular for a segment. So if you want to get a chance to ask the Premier a question, and for goodness sakes, there's plenty that need to be asked, here is your opportunity. So make sure that you're by your radio at 11 o'clock tomorrow. And the Premier will be here on the Todd Veinotte Show. Oh, Vanessa's putting her headphones on. I probably said something wrong. Am I in trouble?
No, I was also just going to say that if you can't call in or don't think that they're going to be able to do that, give us a call at 902-417-0673. That's Todd's talkback line. Just leave a message there and we will try to get those as well.
The number again?
902-417-0673.
One more time.
902-417-0673.
It's called rolling the numbers in the business. Anyway, that is your opportunity. So you've been forewarned. You've got lots of ample opportunity to get ready and be ready. And I look forward to a vigorous conversation with the Premier tomorrow. That's going to happen at 11 o'clock right here on the Todd Veinotte Show. Let's very quickly get Rafe on the air. Rafe, how are you?
Good. Yeah, fine. How are you?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
Yeah, well, I just got in my car and I heard you make a comment that we need to run government like a business.
Yep.
A business is in the business of making money. That's what businesses do.
Okay.
And a government's business is they're there to take care of people. They're not there to make a profit. They're not there to cut and slash if it's not working properly. If it costs more money to take care of people with Medicare and roads and unemployment insurance and health care and mental health, that all costs money. Now, if you want government to be run like a business, then they're going to you want government to make a profit off of us? Is that what,
I would much prefer them break even. I would much prefer us not spending billions of dollars servicing debt.
But that's the world we live in. Every country in the world has debt.
Okay.
I mean, everybody has debt. I mean, so let's pay the debt off and not take care of anybody. Just stop having health care. Stop having unemployment insurance.
Well, nobody's saying we're going to stop having it, but I think it could be run much more efficiently, Rafe. I really do.
I don't have a problem with being run efficiently, but government's if it's run efficiently, great. But if they're going into debt, but if I go to a hospital with a heart attack and I'm taken care of, and I think I might be going to debt for this. I'd rather have a little bit of debt than be dead. I mean, you can't run a government like a business. You want to be a CEO of some of these companies that you like to have run like a business, make $35, $40 million a year, some of these CEOs. And guess what the people at the bottom are making? Like Jeff Bezos at Amazon. I bet you his bottom staff are probably making barely more than minimum. Is that how you want a government to be run?
I just think that we can do a lot better with the money. Rafe, I appreciate it. We're out of time, man. I just think we can be better run, and we can spend money better, and we can stop forking over money for the service of debt. I can't see why that's a problem. Anyway, appreciate the time, everybody. Appreciate Vanessa Vandenez for all she does on the other side of the glass. Todd's back tomorrow. Until I see you, we'll see you when we see you. And remember, be kind to one another.